The blood on her torn dress caught the afternoon sun like rubies scattered across calico, and Quinn knew before he even reached her that this woman's survival was nothing short of a miracle. He reined in his roan mare, dismounting in one fluid motion as he approached the figure slumped against the twisted trunk of a drought-starved oak. The Oklahoma Territory stretched endlessly in all directions, a sea of burnt grass and red dirt under the merciless July sun of 1883, and finding anyone out here alone was unusual enough without the obvious signs of violence marking her clothes, and the defensive way she clutched a broken wagon wheel spoke like a weapon. "Madam," Wade called out softly, keeping his distance and his hands visible. 26 years of living in rough country had taught him caution, but the instinct to help overrode his wariness. "I mean you no harm. Name's Quinn. Looks like you could use some help." The woman's head lifted slowly, revealing a face pale beneath the dust and grime, eyes the color of storm clouds watching him with equal measures of fear and desperation. She couldn't have been more than 23 or 24 years old, with dark auburn hair escaping from what had once been a neat bun. Her lips were cracked from dehydration, and when she tried to speak, only a rasping sound emerged. Wade moved quickly to his horse, retrieving his canteen. He approached with careful steps, mindful not to spook her further. "Here, small sips now, or you'll make yourself sick." Her hand trembled violently as she reached for the canteen, and Wade noticed the raw rope burns circling her wrists. Something hot and angry flared in his chest at the sight, but he kept his expression neutral. Whatever had happened to this woman, she'd been through enough without him adding to her distress with his rage. She drank greedily despite his warning, water spilling down her chin. When she finally lowered the canteen, some color had returned to her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "I thought I would die out here." "You nearly did," Wade said honestly, studying her more carefully now. Beneath the obvious trauma she was striking, with fine features and an elegance that spoke of education and refinement despite her current state. "Where's your wagon, your people?" The woman's face crumpled, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Gone, all gone. They took everything and left me for dead." Wade felt his jaw tighten. Bandits had been plaguing the trails between Fort Smith and Tahlequah for months now, growing bolder with each successful raid. The territorial authorities seemed more concerned with politics than protecting travelers, leaving honest folk vulnerable to predators in human form. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. "My horse can carry double, but we need to get you somewhere safe. Tahlequah's about 15 miles north. There's a doctor there and the marshal." She nodded, attempting to push herself upright, but her legs buckled immediately. Wade caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her carefully into his arms. She weighed next to nothing, and he could feel her ribs through the torn fabric of her dress. "How long had she been out here?" "I've got you," he murmured, carrying her to his mare. "What's your name?" "Olivia," she managed. "Olivia James." Wade settled her onto his horse first, then swung up behind her, wrapping one arm securely around her waist to keep her steady. She sagged against his chest immediately, her remaining strength finally giving out. He could feel her trembling against him, whether from shock, fear, or exhaustion he couldn't tell. Probably all three. "Rest if you can, Miss James," he said, nudging his mare into a steady walk. He wanted to push harder, but wasn't sure Olivia could handle more than this gentle pace. "We'll be in town before dark. You're safe now." As they rode, Wade's mind churned with questions he knew better than to ask yet. The rope burns, the blood on her dress, the way she'd been left with nothing in country that could kill a person in a day without water. Someone had meant for her to die slowly. The thought made his blood run cold despite the oppressive heat. After about an hour, Olivia stirred against him. "You must think I'm terrible," she said quietly. "A proper woman wouldn't be alone out here." "I think you survived something terrible," Wade corrected firmly. "That's all I need to know right now. The rest can wait until you've been looked after properly." "My husband," she began, then stopped, her whole body going rigid. "My husband did this to me." The words hung in the air between them like a thunderclap. Wade's arm instinctively tightened around her waist, protective rather than restraining. "He's the one who left you out here." "He and his brothers." Olivia's voice was flat now, emotionless, as if she'd retreated somewhere deep inside herself to escape the horror of remembering. "They said I was worthless, barren, that I didn't deserve to live if I couldn't give Thomas sons." Wade felt sick. He'd seen cruelty in his years trailing cattle and working ranches across the territory, but this particular brand of evil struck something raw in him. "How long were you married?" 3 years. A bitter laugh escaped her. 3 years of trying, of praying, of hoping. The doctor insisted. "Louis said there was nothing wrong with me, that sometimes these things just take time." But Thomas didn't want to hear it. His family had already paid my father a bride price, expected a return on their investment. The casual way she spoke about being treated like livestock made Wade's hands clench on the reins. "Where were you headed when they left you?" "Nowhere. We were living outside of Fort Gibson. Thomas told me we were going to visit his brother's family for supper. But once we were far enough from town, he just stopped the wagon." Her voice cracked again, fresh tears flowing. "He said I disappointed him for the last time, said the land would claim me like it claimed all useless things. His brothers tied me up, took everything I had including my shoes, and just rode away." "When was this?" 3 days ago, I think. Maybe 4. Time got strange after the first night. 3 or 4 days without water in this heat, and she was still alive." Wade marveled at her strength even as his heart broke for what she'd endured. "Did they hurt you?" "Beyond leaving you stranded," he felt her shake her head. "Thomas never liked touching me once he decided I was defective, said it was a waste of his time. In a way, that made it worse. At least if he'd been cruel in that way, I would have understood it. But to him, I was simply nothing. Not worth loving, not worth hating, just nothing at all." Wade had no words adequate for the moment, so he simply held her a little closer, silently promising that she wouldn't face nothing ever again. He might be just a ranch hand with little to his name beyond his horse and his reputation for honest work, but he'd be damned if he let this woman feel worthless for one more minute. They rode in silence for another hour before Olivia spoke again. "Why did you help me?" Most men would have ridden past. The question surprised him. "I've never been the kind to leave someone suffering if I could help it. My mother raised me better than that, God rest her soul. She's passed. 10 years now. Fever took her quick, which was a mercy. My father followed her within the year. I think he died more from a broken heart than anything the doctors could name." Wade heard the old grief in his own voice and cleared his throat. "They loved each other fierce, my parents. Saw them hold hands every day of their marriage, even when times were hard. That's what marriage should be, not what you described." "I used to believe in love like that," Olivia said softly. "My parents had it too. When my father arranged my marriage to Thomas, he assured me it was a good match, that Thomas came from a respectable family with good land. I trusted him. I thought even if we didn't love each other at first, we would learn to, the way people do." "What happened to your parents?" "Influenza, 2 winters ago. They're buried in St. Louis where I grew up." Her voice took on a distant quality. "Sometimes I'm grateful they didn't live to see how their daughter's life turned out. It would have broken their hearts." "Your life isn't over, Miss James," Wade said firmly. What happened to you was evil and wrong, but you survived. That counts for something. Olivia turned her head slightly, enough that he could see her profile. What kind of life can I have now? I'm a married woman with no husband and no prospects. Even if Thomas hadn't told everyone I'm barren, who would want a woman who's been cast out like trash? The kind of man worth having would want exactly that kind of woman, Wade replied without hesitation. One who's strong enough to survive the unsurvivable. One who knows her own worth even when others tried to convince her she had none. She didn't respond to that, but he felt some of the tension leave her body. Good. She needed to rest, to gather her strength for what came next. Facing down a town full of strangers, and telling her story wouldn't be easy, but Wade would be beside her every step of the way. The sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and purple when they finally reached the outskirts of Tahlequah. The town had grown considerably in recent years, with Cherokee families mixing with white settlers and freedmen to create a diverse community. Wade had been working at the Bar W Ranch just outside of town for the past 8 months and had come to appreciate Tahlequah's rough hospitality. He guided his mare straight to Doc Henderson's house on the north end of Main Street. The doctor was a gruff man in his 60s who'd seen everything the frontier could throw at him and treated everyone equally regardless of their ability to pay. Wade dismounted first, then carefully lifted Olivia down. Her legs wouldn't support her weight, so he carried her up the steps to the doctor's front door, kicking it with his boot rather than trying to knock properly. Doc Henderson opened it himself, took one look at Olivia, and stepped aside without a word. "Back room," he directed, leading the way through his front parlor to a clean examination room that smelled of carbolic acid and dried herbs. Wade laid Olivia on the examination table as gently as he could. She looked up at him with frightened eyes, her hand catching his wrist. "Don't leave," she whispered. "I'll be right outside the door," he promised. "Doc Henderson is a good man. He'll take care of you." The doctor was already rolling up his sleeves. "Mrs. Henderson," he called toward the back of the house. "I need your assistance." A plump woman with kind eyes and graying hair appeared moments later, took in the situation with a practiced glance, and began gathering supplies without being told. Wade recognized her efficiency as that of someone who'd assisted her husband for decades. "Young man," Doc Henderson said, not unkindly, "you can tell me what happened while I work." Wade recounted the story as Olivia had told it to him, his voice hard when he mentioned Thomas and his brothers. Mrs. Henderson made a soft sound of distress, but her hands remained steady as she helped her husband examine Olivia's injuries. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, rope burns, extensive bruising, exposure damage to her skin, Doc Henderson cataloged clinically. "She's lucky you found her when you did, Mr. Quinn. Another day would have been too late." "Will she recover?" Wade asked, hating how his voice caught on the words. "Physically, yes. Emotionally." The doctor shook his head. "That's not something I can treat with medicine. She'll need time and patience." "She'll have both," Wade said firmly, surprising himself with the vehemence of his statement. Doc Henderson's eyebrows rose, but he didn't comment on Wade's declaration. "Mrs. Henderson will get her cleaned up and into a proper bed. You should go speak with Marshal Crawford. Tell him what you told me. If this Thomas and his brothers are still in the territory, they need to be brought to justice." Wade nodded, though every instinct in him rebelled against leaving Olivia even for the short time it would take to find the marshal. But Doc Henderson was right. Men who would leave a woman to die in the wilderness needed to answer for their crimes. He found Marshal Crawford in his office, a small building next to the territorial courthouse. The marshal was a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. He listened to Wade's story without interrupting, making notes on a piece of paper with careful precision. "Thomas what?" he asked when Wade finished. "You didn't get a last name." Wade felt his stomach sink. In his concern for Olivia, he'd forgotten to ask. She said James was her last name, so presumably his as well. James is common enough. You said they were living outside Fort Gibson. Marshal Crawford pulled out a worn ledger from his desk, flipping through pages. "Thomas James. Yes, here. Registered a homestead claim about 4 years ago, quarter section along 14-Mile Creek. Brothers are listed as co-claimants, Benjamin and Samuel James." "Can you arrest them?" The marshal's expression grew grim. "That's complicated. If Mrs. James is legally married to Thomas, technically she's his property under territorial law. A man can't be charged with stealing or destroying his own property." Wade felt his temper flare. "She's not property, she's a person. I agree with you, son, but the law's the law." Marshal Crawford held up a hand before Wade could explode. "However, attempted murder is another matter entirely. If we can prove he intended to kill her by abandonment, that's a hanging offense. The problem is getting proof that would stand up in court. Her testimony isn't enough. Word of a wife against her husband. Most judges wouldn't even hear the case." The marshal stood, settling his hat on his head. "But I'll ride out to the James homestead tomorrow, ask some questions. Sometimes men who think they got away with something get careless, say too much. Meanwhile, you make sure Mrs. James stays safe and gets the care she needs." It wasn't the immediate justice Wade wanted, but he recognized it was the best he'd get for now. He thanked the marshal and headed back to Doc Henderson's house, his mind churning with frustration at laws that treated women like chattel. Mrs. Henderson met him at the door. "She's sleeping," she said quietly. "I gave her some laudanum for the pain. She'll be out until morning most likely." "Can I see her, just for a moment?" The older woman studied him with knowing eyes, then nodded. 5 minutes. She needs her rest." Wade followed her to a small bedroom at the back of the house. Olivia looked impossibly small in the large bed, her auburn hair spread across the white pillow like spilled wine. Someone had dressed her in a clean nightgown, and her face had been washed, revealing the true extent of the sunburn across her nose and cheeks. Her hands lay on top of the quilt, properly bandaged now. He stood in the doorway, not trusting himself to get closer. Something had shifted in him since finding her on the trail, something he didn't quite have words for yet. All he knew was that looking at her made his chest ache with a fierce protectiveness he'd never felt before. "She told me what happened," Mrs. Henderson said softly from behind him. "What that monster did to her. It's a sin and a shame that the law protects such men." "The law won't protect him from me if he comes near her again," Wade said, his voice low and hard. "I believe you." Mrs. Henderson's hand came to rest gently on his shoulder. "But what she needs now isn't a protector, Mr. Quinn. She needs a friend. Someone who sees her as a person with value, not a problem to be solved or a damsel to be rescued." Wade turned to look at the older woman, recognizing wisdom when he heard it. "You're right. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. You can call me Margaret. And you're welcome to sleep on our front porch if you'd like. I suspect you won't rest easy unless you're nearby." She was right about that, too. Wade settled himself on the porch with his saddle as a pillow and his bedroll spread beneath him. His mare was safely stabled behind the house, fed and watered. Above him, stars began to appear in the darkening sky, thousands upon thousands of them in patterns he'd learned to read during countless nights trailing cattle. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of Olivia calling for help while he searched for her across endless plains. Each time he woke, he found himself listening for sounds from inside the house, making sure she was safe even in unconsciousness. Dawn brought Doc Henderson to the porch with 2 cups of coffee. "You look like hell," the doctor observed, handing Wade one of the cups. "Feel like it too," Wade admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "How's Miss James? Still sleeping, which is good. Her body needs the rest to heal." Doc Henderson lowered himself into the rocking chair next to the door with a grunt. "Margaret tells me you're planning to stick around, if Miss James wants me to. And if she doesn't," Wade considered the question honestly, "then I'll respect her wishes. But I'd like to at least make sure she's safe and settled before I go anywhere." The doctor nodded slowly. "You're a good man, Wade Quinn, but you need to understand something. That woman in there has been broken in ways that won't show on the outside. She's going to have good days and bad days. She's going to struggle to trust, to believe she's worthy of kindness. Healing from what she's been through will take months, maybe years." "I'm not going anywhere," Wade said simply. "Even if it means giving up work, your reputation. Men will talk, about you taking up with another man's wife. Let them talk." Wade met the doctor's eyes steadily. "My whole life, I've watched people do the easy thing instead of the right thing. I won't be one of them." Doc Henderson smiled for the first time. "No, I don't suppose you will. Well then, if you're staying, you might as well make yourself useful. There's wood needs chopping behind the house, and Margaret will appreciate not having to cook breakfast alone." Wade spent the morning doing odd jobs around the Henderson property, keeping himself busy while he waited for Olivia to wake. Around mid-morning, Margaret called him inside. Olivia was sitting up in bed, propped against pillows, looking fragile but alert. Her eyes found his immediately as he entered the room, and something in her expression eased. "Mr. Quinn," she said, her voice stronger than it had been yesterday. "Mrs. Henderson tells me you stayed here all night." Wade shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how presumptuous that might seem. "I wanted to make sure you were all right. I can go if you'd prefer." "No," Olivia said quickly. "Please stay. I wanted to thank you properly for saving my life. I owe you everything." "You don't owe me anything," Wade said, moving closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "I did what anyone decent would do, but not everyone would have." Olivia's hands twisted in the quilt covering her lap. "Did you speak with the marshal?" Wade nodded, then explained his conversation with Marshal Crawford, including the frustrating reality of the legal situation. He watched Olivia's face fall as he spoke, her brief spark of hope extinguishing. "So nothing will happen to them," she said flatly. "They can just go on with their lives while I'm left with nothing." "The marshal is going to investigate," Wade offered, but even he could hear how weak it sounded. "And you're not left with nothing. You have your life, your freedom from a man who didn't deserve you." "Freedom to do what?" Olivia's voice rose slightly, edged with the hysteria of someone pushed beyond their limits. "I have no money, no family, nowhere to go. I'm still legally bound to a man who tried to kill me." "What kind of freedom is that?" Wade had no good answer, so he simply pulled the room's single chair closer to the bed and sat down. "Then we figure it out," he said. "One step at a time. First you get healthy, then we work on the rest." "Why do you care?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. "You don't know me." "I know enough," Wade said. "I know you survived something that would have killed most people. I know you're stronger than you think you are. And I know that what happened to you was wrong, and I can't fix wrong without at least trying to make it right." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. "I don't know how to be strong anymore. I feel broken." Without thinking, Wade reached out and took her bandaged hand in his, careful to be gentle. "Being broken doesn't mean you can't heal. It just takes time." They sat like that for a long moment, connected by touch and shared understanding. Wade felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening onto a room he didn't know existed. He'd never been a man given to flights of fancy, had always been practical and grounded, but looking at Olivia James, he felt the first stirrings of something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. Margaret appeared in the doorway with a tray of food. "Enough heavy talk for now," she declared. "You need to eat, dear. Get your strength back." Wade stood, releasing Olivia's hand reluctantly. "I should let you rest." "Will you come back?" Olivia asked, her gray eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "If you want me to." "I do." Those two words felt like a gift. Wade smiled at her, genuine and warm. "Then I'll be back this afternoon. You eat and rest." He spent the next few hours at the general store, using most of his saved wages to purchase supplies Olivia would need. A proper dress, undergarments, shoes, a brush and mirror, basic toiletries. The store owner, a gossipy woman named Mrs. Fletcher, tried to pry information from him about who the items were for, but Wade simply paid and left without satisfying her curiosity. When he returned to the Henderson house, he found Olivia sitting in the front parlor, dressed in one of Margaret's house dresses that hung loose on her thin frame. She looked exhausted but determined, and Wade felt a surge of admiration for her resilience. "Mrs. Henderson said I needed to start moving around," Olivia explained when she saw his concerned expression. "That staying in bed too long would make me weak." "Margaret's usually right about such things," Wade agreed, setting his packages down. "I brought you some things, nothing fancy but practical." Olivia's eyes widened as he showed her what he'd purchased. "Mr. Quinn, I can't accept these. It's too much." "It's not nearly enough," Wade countered. "And please call me Wade. Mr. Quinn makes me feel like my father." A small smile tugged at her lips, the first he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, giving him a glimpse of who she might have been before Thomas James broke her spirit. "Then you should call me Olivia. We've moved past formalities, I think." "Olivia," Wade repeated, liking how her name felt in his mouth. "Pretty name." She ducked her head, color rising in her sunburned cheeks. "My mother chose it." "She loved Shakespeare," said Olivia was a character who knew her own mind. "Seems fitting." They talked through the afternoon, conversation flowing easier than Wade would have expected. Olivia told him about growing up in St. Louis, about her love of reading and her skill with a needle. Wade shared stories of his years working cattle drives and ranches across the territory, of the places he'd seen, and the people he'd met. Doc Henderson joined them for supper, and Wade noticed the doctor watching their interaction with approval. After the meal, Wade reluctantly prepared to leave. "Where will you go?" Olivia asked, a note of concern in her voice. "There's a boarding house on 3rd Street that rents rooms by the week. I'll get settled there tonight, then look for work tomorrow." "Your ranch won't take you back," Wade shrugged. "I left without notice. Can't expect them to hold my position." The truth was he'd completely forgotten about the bar W in his concern for Olivia, and he didn't regret it for a second. "That's my fault," Olivia said, distress clear on her face. "You've lost your job because of me." "I made my choice," Wade said firmly. "And I'd make it again. Work can be found, Olivia. You only get one chance to do the right thing in a moment that matters." That night, alone in his small, rented room, Wade lay awake thinking about Olivia's smile, the way she'd relaxed as the afternoon wore on, the intelligence and humor he'd glimpsed beneath her trauma. He'd known her less than 2 days, but already she'd become important to him in ways he couldn't fully explain. He thought about his parents, about the love they'd shared. His father had told him once that he'd known his mother was special the moment he met her, that something in his soul had recognized something in hers. Wade had always thought that was romantic nonsense, the kind of story old people told to make their lives seem more meaningful. Now he wasn't so sure. The next morning, Wade found work with a freight company that ran goods between Tahlequah and Fort Smith. The pay wasn't as good as ranch work, but it was steady and would keep him in town. He worked hard through the day, loading and unloading wagons, but his mind was always partly with Olivia, wondering how she was doing, whether she was thinking of him too. He visited her every evening, bringing small gifts when he could afford them. A book from the general store, wildflowers picked along the road, a ribbon the color of her eyes. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams, slowly building a foundation of friendship that felt solid and real. Olivia grew stronger each day, her body healing faster than her spirit, but Wade could see progress there too. She laughed more easily, the shadows in her eyes gradually receding. Margaret encouraged her to help with light household tasks, giving her purpose and routine. 2 weeks after Wade found her, Marshall Crawford returned with news. He'd ridden out to the James homestead and found it abandoned. Neighbors reported seeing Thomas and his brothers packing up a week earlier, heading west toward Colorado territory. They'd sold their land claimed to a speculator for a fraction of its value, apparently in a hurry to leave. Guilty conscience, maybe, the marshal suggested. Or they heard I was asking questions. Either way, they're gone. Olivia received the news with mixed emotions. Relief that Thomas wouldn't be coming back for her ward, with frustration that he'd escaped justice. He gets to start over somewhere new, she said that evening, sitting on the Hendersons' porch with Wade. Gets to pretend he's a good man, maybe even find another wife to disappoint. Maybe, Wade acknowledged, but he has to live with what he did. That's its own kind of prison, I suppose. Olivia was quiet for a moment, staring out at the darkening street. Wade, can I ask you something? Anything? Why haven't you asked me about having children? Whether the doctor in St. Louis was right or wrong about me being barren. Her voice was carefully neutral, but Wade could hear the tension beneath it. He turned to face her fully, making sure she could see his sincerity. Because it doesn't matter to me. Your worth as a person isn't tied to whether you can bear children. That's something Thomas told you to justify his own cruelty, but it's not true. Most men want sons. Most men want a lot of things, Wade said, but wanting and needing are different. What I need is someone who shares my values, who I can talk to, who makes me want to be better than I am. The rest is just details. Olivia's eyes shimmered with tears. You're saying that now, but what about later? What if you changed your mind? I won't. Wade reached over and took her hand, the gesture familiar now after weeks of slowly building intimacy. I can't predict the future, Olivia. But I can tell you that the person I'm coming to know, the woman you are beneath all the hurt, she's worth more to me than any hypothetical children could ever be. You barely know me, she whispered, but she didn't pull her hand away. Then let me know you better, Wade said, his heart pounding. Let me court you properly. I know the timing is complicated and you're still legally married, but that can be fixed. Divorce is possible in the territory if we can prove abandonment. Olivia stared at him, clearly shocked. You want to court me? I want more than that, Wade admitted. But I'll take what you're willing to give. If all you can offer right now is friendship, that's enough. I just want to be part of your life, whatever that looks like. A tear slipped down her cheek. I'm scared. What if I'm too broken? What if I can't be what you need? Wade brushed the tear away with his thumb, marveling at the softness of her skin. What if you're exactly what I need? What if we're both exactly what we need and we're just too scared to believe it? She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. I've been alone for so long, Wade. Even when I was married, I was alone. I don't know how to let someone in anymore. We'll figure it out together, he promised. One day at a time, one moment at a time. No pressure, no expectations beyond honesty and trying. When Olivia opened her eyes, they held a tentative hope that made Wade's chest tight. "One day at a time," she repeated. "I think I can do that. That's all I'm asking." They sat together as night fell completely, hands intertwined, neither speaking but both feeling the weight and promise of what they were beginning to build. Doc Henderson came out eventually, cleared his throat meaningfully, and Wade took that as his cue to leave. But the next night he was back, and the night after that, and the one after that. They fell into a rhythm, Wade working during the day, Olivia helping Margaret with housework and slowly regaining her strength. Evenings spent together talking and laughing and gradually lowering their defenses. 3 weeks turned into a month, and then 6 weeks. Olivia bloomed under the care and attention, filling out to a healthy weight, her skin losing its burned appearance and taking on a warm glow. She borrowed books from anyone who would lend them and read voraciously, hungry for stories of other worlds and other lives. Wade introduced her to his few friends in town, carefully vetting them first to make sure they wouldn't judge or gossip. Most were decent folk who took Olivia at face value and welcomed her warmly. The town gossips tried to stir up scandal about Wade's attention to a married woman, but he ignored them with the same stubborn determination he applied to everything else. Doc Henderson helped Olivia begin divorce proceedings, citing abandonment and attempted murder as grounds. It would take months to finalize, maybe even a year, but at least it was started. In the meantime, Olivia began taking in sewing work, using her considerable skill with a needle to earn money of her own. "I need to feel useful," she explained when Wade expressed concern about her working too hard. "I need to know I can support myself, that I'm not dependent on anyone's charity." He understood that need for independence, even admired it, so he didn't argue. Instead, he helped her set up a small workspace in the corner of the Hendersons' parlor and spread word that she was available for custom work. Business came quickly. Olivia's stitching was immaculate, her eye for detail exceptional. Women brought her their best dresses to alter, their husbands' shirts to mend, their children's torn clothes to repair. She worked long hours but seemed to thrive on it, taking pride in her craft. One evening in early September, nearly 2 months after Wade had found her, they walked together along Tahlequah's main street as the sun set. It had become their custom, this evening walk, a chance to be alone together away from well-meaning but watchful eyes. "I've been thinking," Olivia said, her hand tucked into the crook of Wade's elbow, "about what you said about courting." Wade's heart jumped, but he kept his voice level. "What about it? I think I'd like that, if the offer still stands." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Around them, other people moved about their evening business, but Wade only had eyes for Olivia. "The offer will always stand, for as long as you want it." She smiled, that full, genuine smile he'd come to treasure. "Then yes, court me, Wade Quinn. Let's see where this goes." Wade felt like whooping with joy but settled for grinning like a fool instead. "Can I kiss you?" Olivia's breath caught, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I think I'd like that too." He cupped her face gently in both hands, giving her time to change her mind, then lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was soft and sweet, tentative at first, then growing more confident as Olivia responded, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Wow," Olivia whispered. "Yeah," Wade agreed, unable to articulate anything more eloquent. They walked back to the Henderson house in comfortable silence, but everything had changed. The connection between them had been acknowledged, given permission to grow into something more than friendship. The next months passed in a haze of happiness Wade had never expected to experience. He and Olivia spent every possible moment together, learning each other's habits and quirks, building the kind of intimacy that comes from truly seeing another person. She told him about the early days of her marriage, when she'd still had hope that Thomas would love her. About the slow erosion of her self-worth as he blamed her for their childlessness, the way his family had turned cold and dismissive. About the loneliness of sharing a bed with someone who viewed her as defective equipment. Wade told her about his childhood moving from ranch to ranch as his father chased work, about the rough men he'd known, and the lessons he'd learned about what it meant to be strong and what it meant to be good. About his mother's death and how it had nearly destroyed his father, proving that love could be both the best and worst thing a person experienced. "I'm not afraid of that," Wade said one night as they sat together watching stars. "Of loving you so much it could destroy me. I think that's the only kind of love worth having." Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm still learning to trust that this is real, that you won't wake up one day and realize I'm not worth the trouble." "Never going to happen," Wade said firmly. "You're the least trouble and most reward of anything I've ever attempted." She laughed at that, the sound filling him with warmth. Olivia's laugh had become his favorite sound in the world, worth any effort to coax out of her. By December, Olivia's divorce was progressing through the territorial courts. Thomas had been officially served papers through publication, having never responded to attempts at direct contact. The judge, sympathetic to Olivia's situation once Doc Henderson testified about her condition when she'd been brought in, seemed inclined to grant the divorce on abandonment grounds. Wade spent his savings on a small house on the edge of town, a modest two-room structure that needed work but had good bones. He threw himself into fixing it up, replacing rotted boards and patching the roof, imagining Olivia there with him. "Don't get ahead of yourself," Doc Henderson warned when he came out to inspect Wade's progress. "She'll need time even after the divorce is final, time to be her own person before she becomes part of a couple again." "I know," Wade said, hammering in another nail. "This isn't about rushing her. It's about having something to offer when she's ready. A home, a future stability." The doctor nodded approvingly. "You're a good man, Wade. She's lucky to have found you." "I'm the lucky one," Wade corrected. "She could have anyone once she's free. The fact that she chose me is a miracle I don't take for granted." Christmas came, and Wade gave Olivia a carefully chosen gift, a beautiful pair of leather gloves, soft and supple, perfect for her small hands. She gave him a shirt she'd made herself, every stitch perfect, embroidered with his initials over the heart. "So I'm close to your heart," she explained, her fingers tracing the letters. "Always, always," Wade echoed, pulling her into his arms. They'd grown more comfortable with physical affection as the months passed, though they were careful to maintain propriety. Wade had no intention of compromising Olivia's reputation any further than associating with him already had. January of 1884 brought cold winds and occasional snow. Wade's house was finally finished, furnished simply but comfortably. He'd built most of the furniture himself, pouring love and hope into every piece. Olivia's divorce became final on a gray morning in early February. The judge had ruled in her favor, dissolving the marriage and freeing her from any legal obligation to Thomas James. When she walked out of the courthouse, Wade was waiting. "How do you feel?" he asked, searching her face for clues to her emotional state. "Free," Olivia said wonderingly. "Terrified and free, and like I can finally breathe properly for the first time in years." Wade offered his arm. "Want to celebrate? We could get dinner at the hotel restaurant." "Actually," Olivia said, a mischievous glint in her eye that he'd come to adore, "I'd like to see this house you've been working on. You've been very mysterious about it." Wade felt his pulse quicken. "You sure? People will talk if we're there alone." "Let them talk," Olivia said firmly. I'm tired of living my life according to what other people think. Show me your house, Wade. He led her through town to the little house on its small plot of land. It wasn't much compared to some of the fancier homes in Tahlequah, but Wade had made it solid and welcoming. A front porch with a swing he'd built himself, windows that actually sealed against the weather, a good stove for cooking and heat. Inside, Olivia moved slowly from room to room, taking in every detail. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with the table and chairs Wade had crafted positioned near the window for good light. The bedroom was small but cozy, the bed frame sturdy and topped with a quilt he'd traded a week's wages for. Wade, Olivia breathed, turning to face him with tears streaming down her face. It's perfect. It's everything I ever dreamed of when I thought about what a real home could be. He crossed to her, unable to stay away any longer. It's yours if you want it, if you want me. I know the timing isn't ideal, that you probably need time to figure out who you are without a man defining you, but I need you to know. This house, my heart, everything I have or will ever have, it's yours. I love you, Olivia. I think I have since the moment I found you on that trail, broken but still fighting. Olivia reached up to cup his face, her gray eyes intense and clear. I love you too. I've been afraid to say it, afraid it was too soon or that I was just grateful or confusing safety for love. But it's not gratitude or confusion, Wade. It's love. You've shown me what it means to be valued, to be seen as a whole person. You've given me back myself, and I want to give myself to you in return. Wade kissed her then, pouring months of longing and restraint into the contact. Olivia responded with equal passion, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing close to his. When they finally broke apart, both were shaking. Marry me, Wade said, the words tumbling out. I know it's fast, that we should probably wait, but I don't want to waste another day not being your husband. Marry me, Olivia. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you, today, tomorrow, whenever you want. Just yes. They married the following week in a simple ceremony at the Henderson house, with Doc Henderson officiating and Margaret standing as Olivia's witness. A few of Wade's friends from the freight company attended, along with some of the women Olivia had sewn for, forming a small but supportive gathering. Olivia wore a dress she'd made herself from fabric Wade had insisted on buying, a soft blue that matched her eyes when she smiled. Wade wore his new shirt with his initials embroidered over his heart and tried not to cry when he saw her walking toward him. The vows they spoke were traditional, but felt profound given what they'd both survived to reach this moment. When Wade slipped a simple gold band onto Olivia's finger, his hands were steady with certainty. I love you, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I will love you every day for the rest of my life. This I promise. I love you, Olivia replied, her voice strong and clear. You saved my life, and now I give it back to you freely, to share as partners and equals. This I promise. The party afterwards was modest but joyful. Margaret had made a cake and someone produced a fiddle for dancing. Wade held Olivia close as they swayed to the music, marveling that this was his life now, that this remarkable woman had chosen him. That night, in the house Wade had built for them, they came together as husband and wife with tenderness and passion. Olivia cried a little, overwhelmed by the difference between being wanted and being used, but they were happy tears. Wade took his time, making sure she felt cherished and safe, proving with actions what his words had already declared. Afterwards, lying tangled together in the darkness, Olivia traced patterns on Wade's chest. I never thought I could be this happy, she murmured. Didn't think I deserved it. You deserve everything, Wade replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. The first months of marriage were an adjustment, learning to share space and merge lives, but it was joyful work. Wade continued with the freight company, while Olivia built up her sewing business, working from home and building a reputation for quality work. They fell into comfortable routines, Wade leaving early for work with a kiss and Olivia's lunch packed carefully, coming home to find her at her sewing with dinner ready and stories about her day. Evenings spent talking or reading together, nights spent learning each other's bodies and hearts with patient thoroughness. Spring came, and with it new life. Wade planted a garden behind the house, and Olivia delighted in planning what they'd grow. They talked about the future, about maybe saving enough to buy a small ranch of their own someday, about growing old together on land they'd worked with their own hands. In May, Olivia began feeling unwell. She dismissed it as something she ate, but when it persisted, Margaret Henderson insisted she see Doc Henderson. Wade went with her, holding her hand during the examination. When the doctor finished, his expression was carefully neutral. "Mrs. Quinn, when was your last monthly course?" Olivia's brow furrowed in thought. "I don't know, February maybe. They've always been irregular, so I didn't think anything of missing them." Doc Henderson nodded slowly. "I believe you're pregnant, about 3 months along if I'm judging correctly." The room seemed to spin. Wade felt Olivia's hand tighten convulsively around his as she made a strangled sound. He looked at her face and saw shock, disbelief, and dawning terror. "That's not possible," she whispered. "The doctor in St. Louis said I was barren. Thomas said I was defective. The doctor in St. Louis was wrong," Doc Henderson said gently. "And your first husband was a fool. You're carrying a child, my dear. Due sometime in early November, I'd estimate." Olivia turned to Wade, her eyes huge and frightened. "Are you angry?" The question broke his heart. "Angry? Olivia, I'm thrilled." "Why would I be angry?" "Because you said children didn't matter to you, that you wanted me regardless, and now everything changes." Wade pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Nothing changes except we're getting something wonderful we didn't expect. I love you, Olivia." "Baby or no baby, that doesn't change. But I'm not going to lie and say I'm not happy about this. I'm ecstatic." She clung to him, trembling. "I'm scared. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't do this?" "You're the strongest person I know," Wade said firmly. "And you won't be alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. We'll do this together." Doc Henderson gave them some privacy, and Wade held his wife while she cried out years of accumulated pain and fear. The diagnosis of barrenness had been used as a weapon against her, proof of her worthlessness in Thomas's eyes. Learning it had been wrong all along was vindication, but also frightening in its implications. "He could have been kinder," Olivia said when she finally calmed enough to speak. "If the problem wasn't me, then it was him, or just bad timing. He had no right to blame me, to make me feel broken." "No, he didn't," Wade agreed. "But he's gone now, and you're here with me, carrying our child. That's what matters." Over the following days, Olivia gradually accepted the reality of her pregnancy. Wade could see her warming to the idea, a hand drifting unconsciously to her still flat stomach, a small smile when she thought he wasn't looking. He treated her like spun glass at first, which made her laugh. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she teased. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my woman carrying my child," Wade countered. "That's unprecedented and therefore worth extra caution." She rolled her eyes but let him fuss, seeming to understand his need to protect her after nearly losing her before they'd even met. As summer progressed, Olivia's belly grew, and with it her confidence. She glowed with health, all traces of the half-dead woman Wade had found on the trail erased. They talked about names, debated whether they wanted a boy or girl, made plans for how they'd arrange the house to accommodate a baby. Wade built a cradle from oak, sanding it smooth and carving simple designs into the headboard. Olivia sewed tiny clothes, marveling at the smallness of them, the reality of a new life they'd created together. In October, Marshall Crawford stopped by their house with news. Thomas James had been found dead in Colorado, killed in a saloon fight over a card game. His brothers had apparently scattered after that, disappearing into the vast western territories. "Thought you'd want to know," the marshal said, watching Olivia carefully. "That chapter of your life is closed for good now, Mrs. Quinn." Olivia placed a hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick in response. "Thank you for telling us, Marshal, but that chapter closed the day I married Wade. Thomas has been dead to me for a long time now." After the marshal left, Wade found Olivia standing at the window staring out at the October sunset. "Are you all right?" he asked, coming to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I thought I'd feel something," Olivia said quietly. "Grief or relief or anger. But I just feel nothing for him. He's a stranger who hurt me once, someone I used to know. The real tragedy is that he died never knowing what love could be, never experiencing what we have." Wade kissed her temple. "His loss, my eternal gain." She turned in his arms, her belly pressed between them. "I love you so much, Wade Quinn. You've given me everything I thought I'd lost forever: safety, love, purpose, hope. And now a baby. How did I get so lucky? I'm the lucky one," Wade insisted. "Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me." Their baby, a boy they named William, arrived on a cold November night with Doc Henderson in attendance. The labor was long and difficult, and Wade felt every moment of Olivia's pain as if it were his own. He stayed by her side throughout, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could. When William finally emerged, red-faced and screaming, Wade felt something shift fundamentally in his chest. This was his son, his and Olivia's, proof of their love and the new life they'd built together. Olivia cried when Doc Henderson placed William in her arms, tears of joy and wonder streaming down her exhausted face. "He's perfect," she breathed. "Wade, look at him. He's absolutely perfect." Wade looked at his wife and son together, both healthy and whole, and felt gratitude so profound it was almost painful. "You're perfect," he corrected. "You're both perfect, and you're mine." Those first weeks with William were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Neither Wade nor Olivia had much experience with infants, so they learned together through trial and error. Wade took time off from work to help, determined to be present for every moment he could. He changed diapers and walked the floor with a crying baby at 3 in the morning. He watched in awe as Olivia nursed their son, marveling at the fierce protectiveness in her expression. He fell even more in love with his wife as she blossomed into motherhood with the same strength and grace she'd shown in surviving and healing. William was a hungry, healthy baby who grew rapidly. He had Wade's dark hair and Olivia's gray eyes, a perfect combination of both parents. Wade spent hours just watching him sleep, counting tiny fingers and toes, making silent promises about the kind of father he'd be. "I'll teach you to be strong," he whispered to his sleeping son. "But more importantly, I'll teach you to be kind, to value people for who they are, not what they can give you, to love fiercely and protect those who need protecting. And I'll make sure you always know how much your mother and I wanted you, how much joy you've brought to our lives." As winter settled in, the Quinn family spent cozy evenings by the fire, William sleeping peacefully while Wade and Olivia talked quietly or simply sat in comfortable silence. Wade had never imagined he could be this content, this fundamentally at peace with his life. Do you ever think about that day?" Olivia asked one evening, nursing William while Wade cleaned up after supper. "The day you found me." Wade paused in his work, considering the question. "Every day," he admitted. "Not the horror of it, but the miracle. If I'd ridden a different trail, if I'd been even an hour later, we never would have met. William wouldn't exist. Sometimes that possibility terrifies me so much I can hardly breathe." "Me too," Olivia said softly. "I was so close to giving up. Another day, maybe even another hour, and I wouldn't have had the strength to keep going. You saved my life in so many ways, Wade. Not just by finding me, but by showing me what I was worth, by loving me back to wholeness." "You saved mine too," Wade said, coming to sit beside her. "I was just drifting before I met you, working one job after another with no real purpose beyond survival. You gave me a reason to build something permanent, to put down roots. You made me want to be the kind of man worthy of someone like you." William finished nursing and began to fuss, so Wade took him, settling the baby against his shoulder to burp him. Olivia watched her husband and son together, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "I want more," she said suddenly. Wade looked at her in surprise. "More babies. More everything. More years together, more children if we're blessed with them, more quiet evenings like this. I want to grow old with you, Wade. I want to watch William grow up and have children of his own. I want 50 years of this happiness, of knowing I'm loved and valued and safe." "You'll have it," Wade promised. "All of it and more. I'm not going anywhere, Olivia. You're stuck with me until the day I die, and even then I'll find a way to stick around in spirit." She laughed, the sound making William startle slightly before settling again. "That's all I needed to hear." The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. William grew into a bright, energetic toddler who kept his parents constantly busy. Wade was promoted at the freight company, and Olivia's sewing business flourished, with women coming from neighboring towns to commission work from her. They saved diligently, and when William was 3, they bought a small ranch about 5 miles outside of Tahlequah. It wasn't much, just 80 acres and a rundown house, but it was theirs. Wade threw himself into fixing up the property while Olivia managed their finances with careful precision. They started with a few head of cattle and some chickens, gradually building their herd. Wade proved to have a natural talent for ranching, and the business grew steadily. Olivia managed the household and her sewing work while caring for William, somehow making it all look effortless, despite Wade knowing how hard she worked. When William was 4, Olivia became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she wasn't carrying years of trauma alongside the baby. Their daughter, Grace, was born in the spring of 1889, a tiny, delicate thing with Olivia's auburn hair and Wade's smile. William was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Wade taught him to be gentle, to support her head, to understand that babies were fragile but also resilient. Watching his son with his daughter, Wade felt his heart expand to accommodate even more love than he'd thought possible. The ranch continued to prosper. Wade hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, and they built a proper barn and repaired fences. Olivia's vegetable garden flourished, providing most of their food through the growing season. They canned and preserved for winter, worked side by side during harvest, and fell into bed exhausted and happy each night. Life wasn't always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, cattle that got sick, crops that failed. Grace had croup one terrifying winter when she was 2, and they spent 3 days thinking they might lose her before she finally turned the corner. But through everything, Wade and Olivia faced challenges together, their partnership stronger for being tested. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade took Olivia on a picnic to the spot where he'd first found her all those years ago. The twisted oak was still there, a little more weathered but surviving like Olivia herself. "Why here?" she asked, though she'd already guessed. "Because this is where our story started," Wade said, spreading a blanket in the shade. 10 years ago, I rode past this tree and found the most stubborn, strongest, most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She was half dead but still fighting, and something in me recognized something in her. I've spent the last decade being grateful every single day that I took this trail instead of another." Olivia settled beside him, her head on his shoulder. "I've spent the last decade learning to believe I deserved the happiness you gave me. Some days it's still hard to accept that this is my life, that I get to wake up next to you, that we have William and Grace, that I'm genuinely happy." "Believe it," Wade said, tilting her face up to kiss her softly. "This is real, Olivia. This is what we built together from nothing, from the worst moment of your life and an accident of timing. We took pain and trauma and transformed it into love and family and a future. That's not luck or chance. That's us choosing each other every single day." They stayed at the oak tree for hours, talking about the past and dreaming about the future. William was 11 now, already showing signs of the man he'd become, strong and kind like his father. Grace was 6, bright and curious, with Olivia's love of learning. They talked about expanding the ranch, about William's education, about maybe having another child if they were blessed that way. As the sun began to set, Wade helped Olivia pack up their picnic. Before they left, she placed her hand on the rough bark of the oak tree. "Thank you," she whispered, "for surviving long enough to bring us together." They never did have another child, but Grace and William filled their lives with more than enough joy and chaos. Wade taught his son everything he knew about ranching and horses, about treating people fairly and standing up for what was right. Olivia taught Grace to sew and read, about being strong in a world that often undervalued women, about knowing her worth regardless of what others said. The ranch grew into one of the most successful operations in the area. Wade earned a reputation for honesty and fair dealing, while Olivia's sewing skills expanded into custom tailoring that attracted clients from as far away as Fort Smith. They built a new, larger house, but kept the small original house Wade had built for their first home, using it as a guest house. Doc Henderson and Margaret remained close friends, with the older couple doting on William and Grace like grandparents. When Doc Henderson passed away in 1895, Wade and Olivia mourned deeply, knowing they owed their happiness in part to his compassion and care. Margaret lived another 10 years, dying peacefully in her sleep at 83, surrounded by the community she'd helped heal for decades. William grew tall and handsome, graduating from the territorial school at 18 and immediately taking over more responsibility at the ranch. He'd inherited Wade's work ethic and Olivia's head for business, proving himself more than capable. When he was 20, he married a schoolteacher named Sarah, and Wade saw in his son's eyes the same love he felt for Olivia. Grace proved to be a gifted seamstress, eventually taking over Olivia's business entirely so her mother could focus on the ranch and her growing collection of grandchildren. She married at 22 to a kind man named Daniel who worked at the territorial courthouse, and they built a house in Tahlequah close to the family business. By 1905, Wade and Olivia were grandparents 5 times over, with William and Sarah contributing 3 children and Grace and Daniel adding 2 more. The ranch had expanded to over 300 acres, prosperous and well-managed. They'd weathered Oklahoma becoming a state in 1907, adapted to changing times while maintaining the values they'd always held. On a warm evening in June of 1909, Wade found Olivia sitting on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. They were both in their 50s now, gray threading through their hair, lines marking their faces, but to Wade, Olivia was as beautiful as the day he'd found her on the trail. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling into the rocking chair beside hers and taking her hand. "Everything," Olivia said softly. "How different my life could have been, should have been by all rights. I was supposed to die out there, Wade. Thomas and his brothers left me for dead, and they had every reason to believe I would be, but I didn't die. You found me, and instead of death, I got 25 years of the most extraordinary life I could have imagined." Wade squeezed her hand gently. "We got each other, that's what matters. You ever regret it? Taking on a broken woman with nothing to offer?" "Never once," Wade said firmly. "Not for a single second of any day we've been together. You weren't broken, Olivia. You were bent and bruised and hurt, but never broken. And you had everything to offer: your strength, your resilience, your capacity to love despite having every reason not to. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be better than I was. How could I ever regret that?" Olivia's eyes filled with tears, happy ones this time. "I love you so much, Wade Quinn, more now than I did 25 years ago, which I wouldn't have thought possible. You've been my salvation, my partner, my best friend, my home. Everything good in my life stems from the moment you decided to help a stranger on a trail." "I love you too," Wade said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are and always will be the best thing that ever happened to me. Finding you wasn't luck or chance or accident. It was fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. We were meant to find each other, to build this life together." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, hands intertwined, both reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Around them, the ranch hummed with the peaceful sounds of evening. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in the barn, the rustle of wind through the trees Wade had planted over the years. Inside the house, they could hear William and Sarah's children playing, their laughter floating out through open windows. Grace and Daniel would be arriving tomorrow for Sunday dinner, bringing their 2 children. The house would be full of noise and chaos and love, exactly as Wade and Olivia preferred it. "We did good," Olivia said eventually. "Raised good children who married good people and are raising good children of their own. Built something lasting from nothing. That's not a bad legacy." "It's a magnificent legacy," Wade corrected. "And it all started with you being strong enough to survive, brave enough to trust again, and generous enough to give a weathered cowboy a chance to prove himself worthy of you. You've proven it every day for 25 years, Olivia said, leaning over to kiss his weathered cheek. "I think you can stop trying so hard now." Wade chuckled. "Not a chance. I'll be trying to prove myself worthy of you until the day I die, and probably after if there's anything after." They eventually went inside, Wade's arm around Olivia's waist, her head resting on his shoulder. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with evidence of their life together. Photographs on every surface, children's drawings stuck to walls, well-worn furniture that had weathered decades of family life. In their bedroom, Wade helped Olivia undress, not out of passion though that still existed between them, but out of tenderness and care. They'd learned each other's bodies intimately over the years, every scar and wrinkle a story, a shared history written on their skin. "Do you remember our wedding night?" Olivia asked as they settled into bed together, her back pressed against Wade's chest, his arm wrapped around her waist. "Every detail," Wade murmured into her hair. "You were so nervous, so afraid that you wouldn't know how to be a wife after everything Thomas had done to you. And I was terrified I'd do something wrong, that I'd hurt you or remind you of bad times." "But you didn't," Olivia said, her hand covering his where it rested on her stomach. "You were patient and kind and made me feel beautiful for the first time in my life. You've made me feel beautiful every day since, even now when I'm old and gray. You'll always be beautiful to me," Wade said honestly. "Age doesn't change that. You're beautiful because of who you are, not what you look like." Olivia turned in his arms to face him, studying his face in the dim light filtering through their window. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me that no matter what comes, whether we have one more year together or 30, you'll remember how much you are loved, how much you changed my life, how grateful I am for every single day we've had together." Wade felt his throat tighten. "I promise. But you have to promise me the same thing. You have to remember that you are worthy of every bit of happiness we've built, that you deserve to be saved, to be loved, to have this life. None of what happened to you before we met was your fault, and everything good that's happened since is because you were brave enough to trust and love again." "I promise," Olivia whispered, sealing it with a kiss. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, as they had every night for 25 years, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as years always do. Wade and Olivia celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. William took over the ranch entirely, allowing Wade to step back and enjoy his grandchildren. Grace's tailoring business expanded, and she opened a second location in Fort Smith. They lost friends as time passed, attending too many funerals, but made new connections as well through their children and grandchildren. They traveled a little, visiting California to see the ocean and taking a train to Chicago to experience the city. But they always returned home to Oklahoma, to the ranch they'd built together, to the community that had become their family. On a morning in October of 1921, Wade woke to find Olivia still sleeping beside him. She was 62 now, still strong but showing her age more lately. They'd both slowed down, content to let their children handle the day-to-day responsibilities while they enjoyed their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He studied her sleeping face, memorizing features he already knew better than his own. 37 years they'd been married, and he loved her more now than he ever had. She'd been his partner through everything, his constant support and companion. The thought of a day without her was unbearable, but he knew that day would come eventually for one of them. Olivia's eyes fluttered open, catching him watching her. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice still sleep-rough. "Have you been staring at me long?" "Not long enough," Wade said, leaning down to kiss her gently. "Could never look at you long enough." She smiled, reaching up to touch his weathered face. "We've gotten old, haven't we?" "Distinguished," Wade corrected. "We've gotten distinguished." Olivia laughed, the sound still capable of making his heart skip. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Well then, I suppose I'm very distinguished with all these wrinkles and gray hair." "Absolutely," Wade agreed seriously. "Most distinguished woman I know. Also the most beautiful, the smartest, the kindest, and my favorite person in the entire world." "Flatterer," she accused without heat. "What do you want?" "Just more time," Wade said honestly. "More mornings waking up next to you, more evenings watching sunsets together, more years of this life we built. I'm a greedy man when it comes to you, Olivia Quinn. I'll never have enough." Her eyes grew misty. "I feel the same way. Sometimes I can't believe I got so lucky. That I survived long enough for you to find me, that you saw something worth saving in a half-dead woman on a trail, that we built all this together." She gestured vaguely, encompassing not just their bedroom but their entire life. The ranch, their children and grandchildren, the decades of love and partnership. "It wasn't luck," Wade said, as he'd said countless times before. "It was fate." We were always meant to find each other, to have this life together. I believe that with everything in me." They spent the morning slowly, making breakfast together and eating on the porch while watching the ranch come to life around them. William and his oldest son were already working with the ranch hands, moving cattle to a different pasture. Grace would be arriving later with her grandchildren for their usual Sunday visit. "I want to go back," Olivia said suddenly. "To the oak tree. Would you take me?" Wade looked at her in surprise. They hadn't been back to that spot in years, though they'd visited regularly for decades on their anniversaries. "Are you sure? It's a long ride." "I'm sure," Olivia said firmly. "I want to see it again, to remember where we started." So Wade saddled 2 horses, gentler mounts than the spirited animals they'd ridden in their youth, and they rode slowly toward the twisted oak that marked the beginning of their story. It took longer than it once had, with frequent stops to rest, but eventually they reached the familiar landmark. The oak tree had survived, as stubborn as Olivia herself, though time had marked it with dead branches and scars. The Oklahoma landscape stretched in all directions, unchanged by the decades that had transformed Wade and Olivia completely. They dismounted with some difficulty, their joints not as flexible as they once were, and Wade spread a blanket beneath the oak's sparse shade. They settled onto it together, Olivia leaning against Wade's chest as she'd done so many times over the years. "Do you remember what I looked like when you found me?" Olivia asked quietly. "Every detail," Wade admitted. "Blood on your dress, rope burns on your wrists, your lips cracked from dehydration. You were clutching that broken wagon, spoke like a weapon, terrified but still fighting. Most people would have given up, but not you. Never you." "I wanted to give up," Olivia confessed. "So many times during those days alone, I thought about just closing my eyes and letting go. It would have been easier than fighting. But something in me refused to let Thomas win, refused to let him be right about me being worthless. So I kept breathing, kept hoping someone might come, even though I had no reason to believe they would." "Thank God you did," Wade said fervently. "Thank God you were stubborn enough to survive long enough for me to find you." "Thank God you were kind enough to help," Olivia countered. "Most men would have seen a woman alone and taken advantage, or they would have helped but expected something in return. But you just helped because it was the right thing to do, with no expectations." Wade was quiet for a moment, remembering that day and the days that followed. "I fell in love with you that first day," he admitted. "Not just attraction, though you were beautiful even half dead, but something deeper. I looked at you and saw strength and courage and determination. I saw someone worth knowing, worth loving, worth building a life with. It scared the hell out of me at the time." Olivia turned to look up at him, her gray eyes still as clear and beautiful as they'd been at 23. "I fell in love with you quickly too. It terrified me because I'd just escaped one marriage, and I'd promised myself I'd never give another man power over me. But you never asked for power. You offered partnership, respect, love freely given with no strings attached. How could I not love you for that? We've had a good life," Wade said, emotion thick in his voice. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You made me better than I was, Olivia. You made me want to be worthy of your trust." "You were always worthy," Olivia said firmly. "From the moment you offered me water and promised I was safe. Everything that came after just proved what I already knew, that you were a good man, the kind of man I'd dreamed about when I still believed in love." They sat in comfortable silence, both lost in memories of the life they'd shared. Around them, the Oklahoma wind whispered through dried grass, carrying the promise of autumn and the cycle of seasons that would continue long after they were gone. "I'm not afraid anymore," Olivia said eventually. Of dying, I mean. I used to be terrified of it, of leaving this life and everyone I love. But now, I just feel grateful. Grateful for every extra day I got because you found me. Grateful for our children and grandchildren. Grateful for every sunrise and sunset we watched together. However much longer we have, it's more than I should have gotten by all rights. Wade held her closer, blinking back tears. Don't talk about dying. We have years left yet. Maybe, Olivia agreed. But maybe not, and that's okay. We've lived fully, loved completely, built something lasting. Not everyone gets that. Most people never experience what we have. So whether it's years or months or days, I'm grateful for all of it. I'm grateful too, Wade managed, his voice breaking. For you, for our life, for every single moment. You are and always will be the greatest blessing of my life. They stayed at the oak tree until the sun began to set, talking and remembering, and simply being together. When they finally rode back to the ranch, both felt settled in a way that was hard to articulate. They'd returned to where their story began and found it still meaningful, still worthy of the life they'd built upon that foundation. Wade Quinn lived to be 78 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1935 with Olivia holding his hand. His last words to her were, "I love you. Always have, always will. Wait for me." Olivia mourned him deeply but without regret, knowing they'd lived every moment fully together. She continued on for another 6 years, spending time with her extensive family, maintaining the sewing business Grace had built, serving as the matriarch of a family that now included great-great-grandchildren. When Olivia James Quinn died in the spring of 1941 at the age of 82, she was surrounded by 3 generations of family she'd helped raise. Her last words were, "Tell him I'm coming. Tell Wade I never stopped waiting." They were buried side by side in the Tahlequah Cemetery under a simple shared headstone that read, "Wade and Olivia Quinn, partners in life, together in death. Their love survives." The ranch they'd built together remained in the family, passed down through William's children and then their children after them. The twisted oak tree that marked where Wade first found Olivia eventually died and fell, but William had a bench made from its wood that sat in the Quinn family cemetery, a memorial to the place where his parents' love story began. Grace preserved her mother's wedding dress, and the shirt Olivia had made for Wade with his initials over the heart, donating them eventually to the Oklahoma Historical Society as examples of frontier craftsmanship, but also as artifacts of a love story that had become legend in their community. The story was passed down through generations. How Wade Quinn had found a dying woman on a trail and instead of passing by, had stopped to help. How that single act of kindness had blossomed into one of the great love stories of the Oklahoma Territory, a testament to the power of compassion and the resilience of the human heart. Children and grandchildren told their own children about great-grandma Olivia, who'd survived the unsurvivable, and great-grandpa Wade, who'd seen worth in someone the world had discarded. They spoke of a love built on mutual respect and genuine partnership, of 2 people who'd chosen each other every day for over 4 decades. The land they'd worked together continued to thrive, eventually expanding to over 1,000 acres. The small house Wade had built with his own hands was preserved as historical landmark, furnished with original pieces and photographs documenting the Quinn family history. Visitors came from across the state to see it, to hear the story, to understand what love could build when given the chance. In an old photo album preserved by Grace's descendants, there exists a photograph taken on Wade and Olivia's 50th wedding anniversary in 1934, just a year before Wade's death. They're standing in front of their home, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren numbering in the dozens. Wade's arm is around Olivia's waist, her head resting on his shoulder, both of them smiling with the contentment of people who'd lived exactly the life they wanted. On the back of the photograph, in Olivia's careful handwriting, are the words, "50 years ago, I was left for dead on a trail, broken and alone. Today, I stand surrounded by the family Wade and I built together, proof that love can heal anything and that kindness matters. We were blessed beyond measure. Our story began with tragedy but became a testimony to hope. Remember us and know that it's never too late to choose love, to start over, to build something beautiful from broken pieces." And so the story of Wade Quinn and Olivia James Quinn lived on, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually the beginning of our greatest blessings. That kindness to strangers matters. That broken people can heal and love again. That partnership and respect form the foundation of lasting love. And that sometimes, just sometimes, being in the right place at the right time can change not just one life, but generations of lives to come. Their love story became more than just their own. It became a symbol of hope for everyone who heard it, proof that no matter how dark the present moment, the future could hold joy beyond imagining. All it took was one person willing to stop and help, and another person brave enough to trust and try again. In the end, that was the legacy Wade and Olivia left behind. Not just a successful ranch or numerous descendants, but a living example of what love could accomplish when built on the right foundation. They'd taken pain and transformed it into purpose, taken loneliness and transformed it into family, taken despair and transformed it into decades of joy. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Wade and Olivia Quinn are together still, having earned their happily ever after through 4 decades of choosing each other every single day. Their story, which began with a cowboy finding a woman stranded on a trail, had become eternal proof that true love exists, that it's worth fighting for, and that it can heal even the deepest wounds if given the chance.